We are on the record, Media 1, Volume 3. My name is, I'm with Veritex. Please begin.
We're on the record at 9:13 a.m. on August 23rd, 2017. I am Jessica Chan, and with me are Rahul Kolakar, Michael Foley, Jason Habermeyer, and Monique Winkler. We are officers of the Commission for the purposes of this proceeding. We are today resuming the examination of Elizabeth Holmes, which was adjourned on July 13th, 2017. Would counsel please identify themselves?
Stephen Neal, representing Elizabeth Holmes.
John Dwyer, also for Elizabeth Holmes.
David Taylor, Theranos.
Chris Davies from Weller.
Bill McLucas from Weller.
Ali Lieber from Cooley.
Testimony today is pursuant to a commission subpoena, which has been marked as Exhibit 261. And I'm handing a copy of Exhibit 261 to you now. Ms. Holmes, are you appearing here today pursuant to Exhibit 261?
Yes.
You can put that aside. Ms. Holmes, do you understand that you remain under oath?
I do.
Let the record reflect that a copy of the formal order of investigation in this matter, as supplemented, will be available for examination during the course of this proceeding. Ms. Holmes, when was your last contact with Sunny Balwani?
I think early this year, 2017.
Oh, and how did you meet with him?
It wasn't a meeting. I think it was running the dish, and he was running it at the same time, and we passed each other and said hello.
Was there any other substance to your conversation with him?
I was walking with one of our investors, and I just introduced him and said, "This is who is the investor," and he said hello, and that was it.
And who is
One of our Series A investors.
in Theranos?
Yes.
Why were you meeting with?
He's a close friend, and we were taking a walk on the dish.
Did you talk with about Theranos?
During that dish walk?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember. I think so. Yes, I'm sure I did.
What did you talk about?
Probably where we were as a company at that moment, what we were working to do, his thoughts on our strategy, how we were working to see this vision through.
What were his thoughts on your strategy?
You know, yeah.
Only answer this if you actually remember. I don't want you speculating about what
Yeah,
you talked about.
I don't remember the specifics of the conversation. I remember him being there. I remember walking with him, and I know that I generally always talk to him about how where we are at a given point in time when I see him.
Have you had conversations with Mr. Balwani about the fact that you would be providing SEC testimony?
When he was still working for Theranos in 2016, we had already received subpoenas from the SEC, and he was involved with the legal team with some discussions, but we haven't had any substantive discussions since he left the company.
So that would have been in 2016?
Yeah.
And so you wouldn't have had any conversations with him about the substance of your SEC testimony in
No.
July and today?
No.
Besides counsel, have you had any conversations with anyone about the substance of your testimony before the SEC?
I have not.
When we adjourned testimony on July 13th, we were in the middle of discussing Theranos' interactions with the FDA. Do you remember that?
I do.
Did Theranos submit minutes of meetings it had with the FDA?
I believe so.
Who drafted those minutes?
I don't know it was the same person every time. I know sometimes our regulatory counsel, but there was likely other people as well.
And who was your regulatory counsel?
It varied from time to time. Our internal regulatory counsel was...
Who else would have been involved in drafting those minutes besides?
I don't know.
Were you involved in editing the minutes?
I may have been. I don't remember a specific instance in which I did, but it's likely I would have reviewed documents over the course of the time we were sending information to the FDA.
And what would be the process of drafting and editing those minutes at Theranos?
I don't know there was a formal process in the same way as we've instituted processes now. Someone would have taken notes, and to the extent they were reviewed by the team, they were reviewed and submitted.
who was responsible for taking notes of the meeting at Theranos?
I believe it was different people for each meeting. I don't think it was the same person each time.
And the person who was taking the notes, would they be the one who would also do the first draft of the minutes?
Not necessarily.
Okay. And did you take notes of the meetings with FDA?
Sometimes.
When regulatory counsel would send letters to the FDA on Theranos' behalf, were you ever involved in providing input or edits to those letters?
I can't sit here remembering a specific instance, but it's likely I was.
And you would review correspondence before it was sent to the FDA, correct?
Not always, but sometimes.
You wouldn't review correspondence that your counsel would be sending to FDA on Theranos' behalf?
For example, if it was internal counsel, not every time, but sometimes I would.
Okay, so if it was outside counsel, would you be reviewing correspondence before it was sent out by outside counsel?
I don't know if it was every time, but again, sometimes I would.
Which would be the more likely scenario in which you reviewed it? Were you reviewing outside counsel's work more closely or inside counsel's?
I think it's more what the matter was. If there was a really substantive document that was going in, there's a higher probability that I would look at it. If it was a more tactical communication, then I probably wouldn't.
In earlier testimony, you testified that you believe Theranos could continue using the nanotainer in late 2014, even though FDA told Theranos to seek clearance or approval of the nanotainer. Do you remember that testimony?
I don't remember the specific conversation in here, but yes, that's true.
And so you understood in late 2014 that Theranos, let me repeat that question. You understood in late 2014 that FDA believed that Theranos needed to obtain clearance or approval for the nanotainer, correct?
I understood in late 2014 that the FDA had asked us to file 510Ks for the nanotainer.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
And you also understood in late 2014 that FDA had asked Theranos to obtain clearance and approval for any tests that it was performing on the TSPU, correct?
Yes, I understood that we could continue using our systems as LDTs, but that the FDA wanted to make sure we were filing both the nanotainer as well as our tests with the FDA.
I'm handing to you what's been marked Theranos Exhibit 262. Exhibit 262 purports to be a December 24th, 2014 email to Elizabeth Holmes with a copy to Sunny Balwani. The subject line is re-FYI. Starting base number is TS-0997054. Have you seen Exhibit 262 before?
I'm not sure in terms of the document, but I remember writing the email in the bottom chain.
What is Exhibit 262?
It's two emails, one from me to our team and one in response.
Did you receive and review Exhibit 262 on or about December 24th, 2014?
I don't know. I believe I drafted the email on the bottom on December 24th.
Is this the email that you recall sending, the email on the bottom of 7054? Is this the email that you recall sending after your Christmas Eve 2014 telephone conversation with the FDA?
I think so. Do you mind if I take a quick minute to read it?
Sure.
Yes.
Is this the conversation that you recall in which it told you that Theranos could continue using the nanotainer while it was putting in its 510K submissions?
What I recall from this conversation is asking him whether we could continue running LDTs while doing these submissions, and what I had understood from that conversation was that so long as we were actively working with them, it would be okay to do that.
Did tell you that it would be okay for Theranos to continue using the nanotainers while it was putting in its 510K submissions?
That was what I had understood from the conversation. I can't remember his exact words sitting here now.
Did you take notes of this conversation?
I think so.
Handing to you what's been marked there, and it's Exhibit 263. Exhibit 263 purports to be handwritten notes dated 12/23/14 and 12/24/14. The title of the notes is OTC, with starting dates number THPFM 000-552-8637. Have you seen Exhibit 263 before?
I think so.
What is Exhibit 263?
I believe it's the notes of the call we were just talking about with El.
Does TC at the time mean telephone call?
Yes.
Was that your practice to abbreviate telephone call with TC?
Often. Not necessarily always.
Did you draft Exhibit 263 on or about December 23rd, 2014 and December 24th, 2014?
I think so.
I just wanted to go through some of the notations that we've seen in your notes. So where it has an exclamation mark and a circle around it, if you see halfway down the page it says "go back." What is that indicating to you?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Why do you put an exclamation mark with a circle around it? Does that mean anything to you?
It could be a number of reasons. It could be something to follow up on. It could be something that I wanted to particularly pay attention to. I don't think there was a consistent use of it.
Okay, and when we're trying to read your notes, how do you usually write notes? Because we see a lot of words followed by periods. What do those mean to you?
I mean, I free flow my thoughts, what someone's saying, sort of mixed in. These were from my personal notebooks where I was just trying real time to write things down as I was in a meeting or on a call or jotting down thoughts. There's not a methodical system to it.
Do you carry around a moleskin notebook for that purpose to write down notes of meetings and calls?
I do now, yeah.
Okay. And so how, do you have separate notebooks for different types of meetings or calls?
No.
So it's just one notebook at any period of time?
Yes.
And when you're done with that notebook, do you just then move to the next notebook?
I do. I don't know that was always true going back all the years that we're talking about, but that's what I do right now.
And then if you look back at your notes, some of the words are in parentheses. What does that mean?
I need to look at a specific part of it to walk you through. I don't really think there's a general language to these. It's just sort of free-form jotting things down to try to write quickly when I'm talking to someone.
So why don't we look at, I think the second bullet point down. So it says options, period, say, and then letter in parentheses.
Mm-hmm.
So could you walk us through that bullet point?
Yes, I'm just reading it. Sitting here now, I read it to mean that we had a number of options that were in the letter, and that there was a range of data that we sent. There was a concern from chemistry, but they were more comfortable in the hematology division.
Okay, why don't we go one more bullet point down, just so that we understand how you do write your notes. So what about the third bullet point down? What does that say?
Just reading it. So I think this is a reference to for data we had generated for the hematology assays. For a couple of the assays, there was repeatability issues with platelets not being very tight, but I think what this is saying, sitting here now, is that the FDA was okay with that in part because the assays were going to be measured as part of the system later on in a separate FDA submission, and so the discordance in the assay data was not as much of an issue for a nanotainer filing, which is what we were talking about on that call.
And if you turn to the next couple pages, it looks like your notes span about 3 pages of your notebook. Is that consistent with
Just for
recollection?
I'm not sure it's clear these came from a notebook. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. She said she uses notebooks now, but I don't think
Yeah.
you've established whether this actually came from a notebook, right?
Did this come from your notebook?
I don't know. I mean, I'm using moleskins right now. At different periods of time, I had just pieces of paper with Theranos letterhead, and I also had like pads of paper, like yellow pads. So I don't know.
Okay. So it looks like these notes span 3 pages. Is that consistent with your recollection as to the notes that you took of that call with?
I don't have memory of how many pages the notes were.
On the second page, there's kind of a diagonal slash. At the top of the page there, top left corner. So it might be covered by the state. Kind of far.
Yes, yes, I see it.
Does that kind of like diagonal dash have any purpose or use in your notes?
I don't know. I could sit here and try to reconstruct it if it's useful.
I guess I'm just, in just trying to understand kind of your process. I'm just trying to understand if there's any meaning to. Is it sort of a different topic or?
Yeah, if I were doing that today, I would do it if I was sort of changing thoughts on something, but I don't know that necessarily means what it was here, and it also doesn't necessarily mean that that's how the conversation went,
Okay.
Okay, you can put that one aside. Was there a time when Theranos stopped using the nanotainer?
Yes.
When was that?
I believe it was in the fall of 2015.
When in the fall of 2015?
I don't know by memory. I think August or September, but I'm not sure.
Was it around the time of the FDA inspection of Theranos?
Yes.
Why did Theranos stop using the nanotainer?
Because we had been operating under the assumption that it was okay to be using it as an LDT, and when FDA took the position that one of the nanotainers, the heparin one, needed to be documented under the FDA quality system, which we thought did not have to happen until after we had clearance, we realized that we had a fundamental disconnect with the FDA that we didn't think we had, so we stopped using it. Both of them, not just the heparin one.
Did FDA tell you to stop using the nanotainer at the inspection?
And not that I am aware of.
So is it your testimony that it was Theranos' decision to stop using the nanotainer in August or September of 2015?
Well, I want to be careful with how I answer that question because clearly FDA had concerns. I'm not aware of any direct communication to stop using it, but we stopped in response to the fact that they had concerns.
FDA had told you in a number of letters prior to that inspection to stop using the nanotainers, though, correct?
Was we discussed previously, our understanding with those letters was that commentary was coming because there were certain assumptions that would mean we could not still apply for clearance. And when we worked through those, we thought we were still in good faith working with them and therefore could still continue to use it.
Did you request in writing an opinion from FDA that you could continue using the nanotainer after you had worked out a path forward to gain clearance of the nanotainer?
I don't think so.
Did you ever receive any written indication from FDA that it was okay for Theranos to continue using the nanotainer?
They continued to work with us on our filings as we submitted them, and obviously we're actively using them, and they were continuing to try to help us. But outside of the continued engagement, I don't think there was explicit communication about the use of it as an LDT. In writing.
I'm going to hand to you what we've already marked as Theranos Exhibit 221. I only have one copy, unfortunately, because
This
it's
is
pulling a
big.
lot of trees. So if you turn to page ending 6450.
I don't know if these guys have stamps on them.
Oh. It's,
Should we
it
try
should
Down at
be-
the bottom, down here, you can't,
Not after this one.
Okay.
really.
If you wouldn't mind just sharing them.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Do you have another copy that's got the sequential numbers? And this is,
But you might be able to figure out from the pages.
yeah, can you identify, if you can identify just by the page number? You see the page, not the base number, but at the bottom of each
Oh,
page.
yeah,
there's a number.
212.
Yeah. So then you can take that one.
Got it.
That's 212.
Yes. Okay.
So if you just take a look at the text messages that are taking place between you and Mr. Balwani on 212 and 213, and just let me know when you're done.
The whole page of 212 and 13?
Yes.
Okay.
Are these text messages being sent between you and Mr. Balwani during the FDA inspection of 2015?
I don't know if it was during it, but I believe it's around it, or potentially, I don't know if it was like while the audit was happening.
Okay, so if you look on page 212 of your copy, which is 6450.
Yes.
Towards the bottom, about 5 messages up, it says, "Are you getting a sense from it?" Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you understand that to be as an inspector of the FDA?
I didn't, but I don't have reason to doubt that.
You didn't know who the inspectors were from the FDA who came to inspect Theranos in 2015?
I knew who the one at the site that I was at was.
Who was the one at your site?
I believe.
Okay, and so you see her name also on 213,
Yep.
right? So,
Which site were you at during the FDA visit?
I was in Palo Alto.
Okay, and was your understanding that Mr. Balwani was at the Newark site?
Yes.
do you have any reason to doubt that these text messages were taking place while the inspectors were at Theranos?
Yeah, again, I'm just not sure about the timestamps based on the last time we went through this. It could have been at the end of the day, but I think it generally coincided with the FDA inspection.
Okay, so back on page 212 of your copy,
Mm-hmm.
a few messages up from where it references, it says, from Mr. Balwani, there's a text message saying, "We should discuss tonight turning CTN off."
Mm-hmm.
And then you respond, "Been thinking about it." Do you see that?
I do.
Then Mr. Balwani says, "We don't want them to say we are marketing LDTs, at least we can stop CTN for direct access." What did you understand Mr. Balwani to mean by this?
You know, sitting here now, I'm not completely sure because there was a lot of conversations going on at the same time during these inspections. My reaction reading it now is that we were trying to figure out why the FDA was there and we couldn't understand what they were interested in. And it looks like at this point, he might have thought they were focused on the LDTs and that therefore, if they were looking at the nanotainer as a corollary to the LDTs, then not using the nanotainer to make sure that they weren't going after the LDTs.
So you understood that he was talking about stopping the use of the nanotuners in this section of the text messages, correct?
Again, I don't know, at that moment what I understood. I, sitting here now, think he's trying to figure out why the FDA is there and talking about stopping the use of the nanotators in that context.
Okay. So I'm not asking about your understanding now, but I want to bring you back to 2015 and ask you questions about what your understanding was back then. So was your understanding back then that he was talking here about stopping the use of the nanotainer?
I don't know. This audit happened at a time in which there was a tremendous amount of chaos internally because we thought we were in good standing with the FDA. We were reacting. We had a lot of input. I don't know that I'm going to be able to sit here and tell you what I was thinking when these messages were going back and forth.
So why don't we go to the next page then? So about halfway down the page, this is
This is page 213.
213 at 8:54 p.m. There's a message from Mr. Balwani, and he says, "We can build this business, they software and JP, and run circles around others and FDA by manipulating their game." Do you see that?
I do.
What is JP referring to?
I think it's a reference to Jurassic Park, which is what he called the traditional clinical lab infrastructure.
Okay, so what did you understand him to be saying when he says, "We can build this business, they software and Jurassic Park"?
I think what he's talking about is competing with Quest just based on the software solutions that we had and traditional lab equipment as a model.
Okay, so he's saying Theranos can build the business using just traditional lab devices.
And software.
And software,
Yeah.
is that right?
Yeah.
So just, in other words, managing the process better than a traditional lab would, with the aid of software, and is that fair?
I think that's a part of it. The other part was all the consumer-directed testing, right? So transparent pricing, consumer experience, decision support, direct access, that we could basically compete with Quest on their own game just through that.
Okay, and then the next part of his text says, and run circles around others in FDA by manipulating their game. What did you understand him to mean by that?
I think, I mean, sitting here now, I read it as responding to, we had been getting, we thought that the labs had been reaching out to FDA, and we'd been getting a lot of attacks from them in Arizona, and I think he's talking about how we would competitively respond to the labs.
Okay, so you just said sitting here now. Did you have that same understanding back in 2015?
I can't tell you what my understanding was in 2015. I don't remember. I don't remember this text exchange.
You don't remember this text exchange at all?
I don't.
Okay, he goes on then to say, we just need a fresh start and a giant step back, like we discussed late night. I think that's last night. Do CTN PMA on our terms and then go intelligent on marketing. Intelligent. What did you understand him to mean when he says go intelligent on marketing?
I don't know.
Did he ever use that phrase with you?
I don't recognize it.
And then you respond, we can definitely run circles. What did you mean by that?
Again, sitting here now, I think we're talking about Quest and our thought that they were getting regulators to come in and inspect us, and they were doing things in Arizona like putting sort of bad press about us on the door of patients, and they were going after us really hard.
Were you referring to running circles around the FDA?
I definitely don't think so.
What were you referring to running circles around?
The lab companies.
I guess why don't you think you were talking about running circles around the FDA?
Because we were trying so hard to do the right thing and engaging with the FDA. We hired all the best regulatory counsel. We'd been trying to proactively engage with them. We knew we were doing something different, but we really wanted to do the right thing in terms of working with them constructively.
I guess I'm just trying to understand that in the context of what you recall about this conversation. I mean, do you recall what you meant when sending that message?
No, as I said, I don't recall this text exchange at all. But I know what we were trying to do. I know why we had worked so hard on trying to proactively engage with the agency, and I know that at this time, this is right before the Wall Street Journal articles began, we were aware that the labs had been really going after us, and we thought that this in part was part of that.
So if you look up at Mr. Balwani's earlier message at 8:54 p.m., he does talk about running circles around others and the FDA. Do you see that?
I see the text, yes.
Did you understand him to mean that he was suggesting that you run circles around the FDA?
Again, I don't remember the text conversation. I do not believe that that's what he would have been saying. That's completely inconsistent with everything we were trying to do for all the years in which we had been trying to engage with them successfully.
Did you ever have conversations with Mr. Balwani outside of these text messages about running circles around the FDA?
No, not that I know of.
So then, a few lines down at 8:56 p.m., you write a text message to Mr. Balwani that says, but all our marketing now is for our lab. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then a couple lines down from that, same time, 8:56, Mr. Balwani responds, that's the intelligent part. He goes on to say, we can market our lab and everything, and people will talk about our finger stick without us talking about it. What did you understand him to mean by that?
So she's already told you a dozen times she doesn't recall this conversation. So are you asking for her present interpretation? Or are you asking her the same question over and over as to whether she recalls it?
Do you have any recollection as to, or understanding as to what he would have been referring to there?
Again, I'm happy to tell you my interpretation now. I don't remember this text exchange, but looking at it now, I read it as, again, strategy for how to compete with the labs that we thought were going after us. I don't remember the discussion or what I was thinking at that moment.
Did you ever have conversations with Mr. Balwani outside of these text messages about how even though Theranos couldn't market its nanotuners because FDA had told Theranos to stop using them, that Theranos could continue marketing its lab, and that by doing so, people would continue talking about the finger stick without Theranos needing to market the finger stick?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Did you ever have conversations with Mr. Balwani outside of these text messages about how you could continue marketing the lab and not talking about the nanotuner, and that by doing so people would talk about the finger stick without you needing to market the finger stick?
No, I don't think so.
Did you ever talk with Mr. Balwani about Theranos' marketing being primarily about fingerstick? Do you mind just giving me a little bit more background on what the question is? I'm not sure. Are you referring to like the ads or? Yeah, sure. Why don't we start with the ads? You know,
Yeah.
did you ever have discussions with Mr. Balwani about what the focus of Theranos' marketing should be?
Yes.
And was the focus of that marketing to your memory fingerstick?
No.
What was the focus?
Small samples, low cost, better access.
Do you ever discuss with Mr. Balwani his view that that the marketing could lead one to believe that Theranos was focused on fingerstick?
Yes, and we did, to be clear, have some fingerstick specific advertising, but in general we were trying to have those be the three themes of our advertising. And he and I and the marketing team met and discussed that.
Who else? I think we talked about this sort of before, but other than yourself, Mr. Balwani, and the marketing folks at Theranos, was there anyone else involved in those conversations?
Counsel, and regulatory counsel, and I'm sure there were others from the teams internally. I don't have specific memory of a conversation sitting here now, but probably multiple sort of cross-functional teams inside the company.
Yes. Who had the final say at Theranos in terms of marketing strategy?
I'm trying to remember. I mean, we at one point brought in a woman to be chief marketing officer who had been CEO of a marketing company, and she ran it. We generally reviewed content before releasing it, as a team.
When you say we as a team, meaning yourself and Mr. Balwani as well?
Amongst others, yes.
Okay, going back to page 213 of Exhibit 221. So at 8:57, you respond, yeah, and then Mr. Balwani says, once we have 70% FS. Is FS here referring to fingerstick?
Sitting here now, I think so.
Okay. Did you know, strike that. Did you and Mr. Balwani use FS to refer to anything else during your time managing the company together?
I don't know. That's what I think it is sitting here now.
Okay. At this time, in September of 2015, had the company not developed a method that was capable of performing 70% of tests on fingerstick?
We had developed methods that were capable of performing 70% on fingerstick. I don't know that we had operationalized them in the lab and or that we were getting ordering pattern to be able to see that in the people we were serving at this time. I don't know where we were on it by September of 15.
Okay, so your testimony is that Theranos had developed a method to perform all tests, or 70% of all tests with fingerstick, but had not operationalized that in the lab. Is that your testimony?
We developed multiple methods. I believe by this point we'd operationalized the menu that we thought would realize that, but we never got the patient traffic that matched those ordering patterns.
And then Mr. Balwani then goes on to write at 8:58, so directly under that text message, in parallels from today onwards, we need legal strategy to deal with being aggressive through lawyers only. Do you see that?
I do.
Was Mr. Balwani referring here to the FDA?
I don't know. I can, sitting here now, guess that, but I don't know.
Did you view your interactions with the FDA as aggressive?
You know, not up until this point. During this inspection and after it, I think we made very significant mistakes in how we interacted with them, and I regret that deeply and have tried to change our entire legal infrastructure to do it the right way.
So back in September of 2015, did you agree with Mr. Balwani that you need to engage on a legal strategy to deal with the FDA aggressively?
I don't know. I know that we, from this point, did not deal with the FDA the right way. We made mistakes in how we engaged with them.
Do you have any conversations outside of these text messages with Mr. Balwani about dealing with FDA aggressively?
I can't sit here now and remember specific ones. I remember during this time being really upset that I thought we had been doing the right thing in terms of how we were engaging with them, and deferring to others, including counsel, on things that I probably shouldn't have in how we engaged with them, and we didn't take a constructive approach, and I think that really hurt us.
What do you mean by you didn't take a constructive approach?
We ended up being aggressive in our responses, and that was the wrong thing to do.
So a minute ago when you said sort of you've come to realize that Theranos made mistakes in connection with its interactions with the FDA, other than sort of the aggressive responses, what mistakes are you referring to there?
We had a team of people who believed that we were properly operating with the systems as LDTs, and that the fact that they had not yet been documented under the quality system was consistent with public guidance on LDTs. And instead of responding to the FDA coming in and saying, okay, you have concerns, we'll do whatever it takes to fix it, and do what we've ultimately done in terms of how we've responded to the lab and responded to FDA, they fought the agency, right? And they told them they didn't have jurisdiction, and that was completely the wrong approach.
Did you agree with your attorneys at the time to fight with the agency?
Hang on.
I mean, look, we're not, so far we haven't gone into the content of conversations with counsel. You're right at that line, and asking whether she agreed with legal advice is asking what the legal advice was. So she's talked about approach and whether and her reaction to the approach. That doesn't go into the content of legal advice.
I guess I wanted just one clarification on the last answer. Was when you referred to just a team, who did you mean by the team? Maybe
That's fine.
that'll help clear up.
Yeah, it was a team led by counsel. I think we were.
Wait, hold on a second. I mean, it was a team by that council. Going back, it seems to me, if you want, you could ask whether she agreed at the time with an aggressive approach or didn't. And
That's fine.
yeah.
Yeah, I deferred to it. I didn't know what to do.
Okay.
FDA came in to inspect. I thought we'd been doing the right thing, and I tried to hire people who I thought were the best in the space to say, how do you handle this?
Who else was interacting with your counsel besides yourself at the company?
Sunny was, and then whatever internal teams were dealing with the matters that the council were leading. So it was internal counsel, and then probably some of the technical leads as well.
And who would have the authority at the company to decide how to deal with the FDA?
Well, I mean, as we've discussed in prior meetings, I was an AM, CEO of the company. In this case, I made the mistake of deferring to people on a strategy because I didn't know what the right thing to do was, and it was the wrong strategy.
We discussed earlier in your testimony about the number of Walgreens stores that Theranos believed it would be rolling its services out to. Do you remember that?
The number, would you say it one more time? I was switching to Walgreens.
The number of Walgreens stores that Theranos would be rolling out to?
Yes.
Do you remember the discussion about that? in
Generally,
your
yes.
testimony?
Yes.
So, sorry, I just want to remind you not to talk over each other, and I'll try and do the same thing.
I'm
but
sorry.
In order for us to have a clean record, I think I have to ask the questions, and then we should answer, and vice versa. And I'll try also not to ask the next question before you answer.
Absolutely. Sorry about that.
In your mind, what's the best source of information on the number of Walgreens stores that Theranos could roll out to at any moment in time?
Can I have that question back?
In your mind, what's the best source of information? on the number of Walgreens stores that Theranos could roll out to at any moment in time?
So I don't think there was a single source of information on that. As you know, the relationship was dynamic and changed throughout the course of the relationship. At different points in time, there's indicators. I think the amendment that talked about the number of what they called gold stores that they were committing to build and the presence in multiple states is sort of one indicator that we certainly focused on a lot. I think the other is that for a long time, we and they both actively described it as a relationship to roll out nationally.
So if we wanted to know as of, say, May 2014, how many stores Theranos and Walgreens had discussed rolling out to at that point, what would we need to look to, or who would have that information?
I don't know. If Sonny were at the company, I would have asked him that question. I don't know. And I'm sure if you would like us to piece it back together for you, we could try to do that.
So in your mind, Sonny would have the best information about that?
When he was at the company, yes. That's where I would have gone.
When did Walgreens make its first innovation fee payment of $25 million?
I don't know specifically. I think in 2013. Maybe before that.
So sometime in 2012 or 2013?
Yeah, again, I don't know specifically.
Were you aware of discussions in 2012 whereby Walgreens auditor was asking for evidence that Theranos would be able to repay the $25 million fee if paid to Theranos by Walgreens?
I don't remember that.
Were you aware that Theranos had submitted a letter from Fidelity evidencing its extension of a line of credit to Theranos to show that Theranos would be able to repay the $25 million?
I may have been at the time. I don't have memory of that sitting here now.
Were you aware that Walgreens auditor asked for evidence again in 2014 to show that Theranos would be able to pay back the $100 million innovation fee Walgreens had paid in early 2014?
I don't think so.
Yes, you can put that exhibit aside. I'm handing to you what's been marked Theranos Exhibit 264. Exhibit 264 purports to be a September 23rd, 2014 email from Elizabeth Holmes to Sunny Balwani with subject line Re-Innovation Payment Letter. And starting dates number THPFN 0000696484. Have you seen Exhibit 264 before?
I don't remember it, but I don't have reason to doubt the email.
What is Exhibit 264?
Do you mind if I take a minute to look at it?
Sure.
It appears to be a set of email exchanges back and forth, mostly between Sunny and Walgreens on the innovation payment.
Did you draft Exhibit 264 and send it on or about September 23rd, 2014.
Well, wait a minute, when you say 264, you refer to the whole exhibit?
Is this Exhibit 264?
Yeah, you just asked
No,
whether
you
it was
said,
a-
did she draft it? She didn't,
Are
there's
you
a whole
just-
bunch of stuff here she clearly didn't draft.
Are you just asking about that top email?
Did you draft and send Exhibit 264?
Same problem. Are you talking about the first email?
Yes, I'm talking about the first email.
Again, I don't remember it, but I don't have reason to doubt the document.
And did you receive and review Mr. Balwani's email to you on September 11th, 2014, on or around that date?
I don't remember receiving or reviewing it.
Do you have any reason to doubt that you received it on that date?
No.
So if you look at the first page of Exhibit 264, there's an email from at Walgreens to Mr. Balwani. Do you see that?
Yes.
And worse for Walgreens. Did you understand that at the time?
In 2014?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And who's
I'm not sure. I think he was in the finance department at Walgreens.
So if you look at email to Mr. Balwani, he says, I went back and took a look at the contract. It doesn't offer much guidance on this point. Schedule B, Section 6B6 includes the following sentence. Further, the party shall agree upon the appropriate measure in order to measure collectability as it relates to the initial $25 million payment. Did you understand this email chain to be referring to the collectability by Walgreens of the $25 million innovation payment that it made to Theranos in 2012?
Again, prior to this conversation, I didn't have memory of this email exchange sitting here now. Yes, that looks like what it appears to be.
Okay, and now this is in 2014, and at that time you understood that Walgreens had accelerated the $75 million remaining innovation fee to Theranos, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So he then goes on to copy a number of emails from 2012 dealing with the initial $25 million innovation payment, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he copied them or if it was a response to that exchange or what, but I see the emails.
Okay. And then the last paragraph of his email, he says, while the innovation fee has been paid, the concept of the fee being earned is still at play within the contract. As such, I would take the position that the fee is outstanding as does that term. Were you aware that Walgreens believed the innovation fee, although paid to Theranos, still needed to be earned?
No, my memory was that we thought because we had provided exclusivity and amended the contract that we had earned the payment.
So Mr. Balwani then sends this email on to you, correct?
Yes.
And you respond back to him and you say, do we need a follow-up here? Do you see that?
Yes.
Why were you asking that question?
I don't know.
Did you know whether Mr. Balwani ever followed up on that?
I don't. Reading it now, I would assume he did.
Were you aware in 2014 that Theranos had retained KPMG to conduct a review of its 2012 and 2013 financial statements?
Sitting here now, I didn't remember the timing of it, but I'm sure I was at the time.
And were you aware that KPMG was asked to determine how the first Walgreens innovation fee payment should be accounted for in Theranos' financial statements?
No.
Were you aware that KPMG...
I don't know what I was at the time. I can't remember the interactions in 2014 around it.
Were you aware that KPMG believed in 2014 that the initial innovation fee payment should be accounted for as a customer deposit on Theranos' balance sheets and should not be recognized as revenue?
No, I don't have memory of that.
Who was managing the relationship with KPMG at Theranos?
I think it was...
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I think it was.
Was Mr. Balwani involved in managing that relationship as well?
I think so.
Did you have any interactions with KPMG in 2014?
I don't know.
You can put that exhibit aside. Did Theranos and Walgreens have any further discussions about the innovation fee in late 2014, early 2015?
I can't remember specifically, but probably.
Did Theranos and Walgreens discuss the innovation fee with respect to the new contract amendment the parties were contemplating in late 2014, early 2015?
Again, I can't remember specifically, but I would believe we would have.
Why do you believe you would have?
First, looking at this email, and then secondly, just generally remembering the Boots team wanting to open back up the contract, and that there were negotiations sort of about the contract overall as Boots came in.
Do you recall the innovation fee payment being one of the terms that the Boots team wanted to renegotiate?
I don't recall that specifically, but I know they wanted to renegotiate the whole contract.
Do you have a recollection of what their objectives were in that negotiation? Or what they wanted from Theranos?
I don't know what they wanted. I know that my impression was that they were trying to restructure many things the old Walgreens management team had done.
I'm handing to you what's been marked Theranos Exhibit 265. Exhibit 265 purports to be a February 25th, 2015 email from Sunny Balwani to Elizabeth Holmes. Subject line is Forward Theranos Walgreens Boots Alliance Draft Contract with starting dates number THER-0982058. And there are two attachments with starting dates number THER-0982059 and THER-0982095. Have you seen Exhibit 265 before?
I don't know. I don't have reason to doubt the email chain.
What is Exhibit 265?
It looks like an email exchange and a draft of one of the Walgreens contract amendments.
Did you review and receive Exhibit 265 on or about February 25th, 2015?
I don't doubt that I received it. I don't know that I reviewed it.
So here in this email, you see that Mr. Balwani is forwarding to you an email he received from attaching a draft of the Theranos Walgreens amended contract. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And if you turn to the second attachment at 2099, and actually I think the terms actually start in 2098. But there's a section halfway down the page on 2098 on exclusivity. And then on 2099, there are a number of significant changes to the document, some additions to that exclusivity term. Do you see that?
Yes.
So are these the additional exclusivity rights that Theranos had granted to Walgreens earlier in 2013?
I don't know. I don't know that I have ever actually reviewed this document before.
You don't think that you reviewed this at the time you received it in February 2015?
I don't.
And then if you turn the page to 2100, I'm sorry, and 2101, which is 2 pages later, you'll see on 2100 it starts at paragraph 5. There's a section for the innovation fee. And it notes that Walgreens has paid to Theranos an innovation fee of $100 million. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
And going on to then little b of 5, which is on the next page at 2101.
Yes.
It appears that Walgreens left in language pertaining to how Theranos would earn the $100 million. And you can go ahead and read 5b to yourself.
Was there a question?
Oh, I asked Ms. Holmes to read item B to herself. Let me know when you're done.
Read it.
Was this consistent with your understanding that even though Walgreens had paid the $100 million to Theranos, that Walgreens thought Theranos would still need to hit certain revenue milestones in order to earn the $100 million innovation fee?
No.
Did you also understand that Theranos would need to refund the entire amount if those milestones weren't met?
I'm familiar with this provision from I think it was the original contract agreement, but I mean, as you can see, we were renegotiating everything as we went through these different iterations of the relationship. And as I've said, I believed, based on my discussions with Sunny, that we were at a point in which we'd earned it because of the exclusivity that we provided to Walgreens.
So did you disagree with having this provision in then?
Again, I don't think I ever even read this draft of the amendment.
Did you ever communicate to Walgreens around this time frame, February 2015 or spring of 2015, that Theranos believed that $100 innovation fee was non-returnable?
I don't know. I was in a couple meetings with them, but I wasn't in most of these meetings.
So if you go back to Mr. Balwani's email to you, which is on the first page of Exhibit 265, he says, just received this from WAG, and he's referring to the draft contract, correct?
I think so.
Okay, and then underneath it says, the innovation payment language is closer to what we had wanted. Do you see that?
Yes.
What was Mr. Balwani referring to here?
I don't know.
Why would he write this if you both disagreed with the way that Walgreens was requiring as to Theranos earning back the $100 million innovation fee?
Sitting here now, looking at this, I read this as in the middle of a negotiation, and so I don't think he's saying that it's what we wanted. There seems to be something that is better than a prior draft. I don't know what that was.
Do you recall discussing the innovation payment with Mr. Balwani in the context of renegotiating the contract in early 2015?
I don't recall specific conversations.
Generally, do you recall the nature of your conversations with Mr. Balwani around this time concerning the innovation payment?
Again, my memory was that we thought we'd earned it because of the exclusivity and the investments that we'd made in the relationship.
Do you recall any general strategy on how you were going to effectuate that in the next Walgreens amendment?
I don't. I know that we were looking at changing a number of things, including moving to a rental model, and that there were a lot of different sort of negotiating tactics that were at play. I don't know the specifics of the approach. I would actually defer to Sunny on that.
Was there ever a time when Theranos was contemplating terminating the Walgreens contract?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Do you remember that happening sometime in early 2015 as the companies were renegotiating the contract?
I don't think we were actually intending to terminate. I think that was a negotiating tactic that Sunny in particular sometimes used in trying to get better terms in the deal.
If you wouldn't mind taking back Exhibit 221 over there.
You know, we've got a little over an hour. Can we take a break, or just near the end of the series for you?
Sure, we can take a break, a short break. We're off the record at 10:17 a.m. We can keep the break short. That would really help.
We'll try.